Welcome to Reformed Thinking.
It's great to be back.
Today we're going to get into something a little different. When you think of the Puritans, especially someone like Jonathan Edwards, you probably think of, fire and brimstone.
Right. Sinners in the hands of an angry God,
Yeah.
spiders dangling over the pit. That's the image that sticks.
Exactly. Or you think of these incredibly dense, high-level theological arguments, metaphysics. But today we're looking at a sermon that feels almost uncomfortably practical. It's from his series on 1 Corinthians 13, and the sermon itself is on verse 4. Charity suffereth long and is kind. The title he gave it is, Charity disposes us meekly to bear the injuries received from others.
It's a striking title. And you're right, it challenges that one-dimensional view of Edwards.
Yeah.
When you read this series, His Charity and Its Fruits, you see a pastor who is intensely focused on the friction of daily life.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the universal problem. Dealing with difficult people. I can't imagine anyone listening to this who doesn't have someone in their life. A boss, a neighbor, maybe a family member.
Oh, for sure. Who just seems to know how to treat them unfairly. It's part of the human experience.
It is. It's the result of living in a fallen world full of fallen people. And that includes us, by the way. We're often that difficult person for someone else.
Right. And my natural reaction, my gut reaction when someone pushes me is to push back. It's almost a reflex. You insult me, I want to find a better, sharper insult to throw right back at you.
You want to win. You want to get even.
Yes. It's revenge, it's resentment, it's venting to your friends about how awful this person is. We're wired for it.
That's the instinct of the flesh. But Edwards, right here in this text, he's presenting a completely countercultural thesis. He's saying that real Christian love, or charity, compels you, it forces you, to bear these injuries meekly.
Okay, let's stop on that word, meekly. Because in 21st century English, that is not a compliment. If I call you meek, I'm basically calling you a doormat.
A pushover, spineless.
Exactly. Is that what Edwards is telling us to be? Just
Yeah.
spineless? Not even close. And this is where we have to do a little work to reclaim the biblical meaning of the word. Meekness in this tradition isn't weakness at all. It's actually strength under control.
How so?
The classic illustration is a powerful warhorse. It has all this muscle, this immense capacity for violence and speed, but it's completely submitted to the rider's command. It has the power to bolt, but it chooses not to. That's meekness. It's having the capacity to retaliate, but choosing not to for a higher purpose.
So the goal for this deep dive, then, is to sort of dismantle our natural defense mechanisms, to look at why this meekness isn't weakness, but a very specific kind of theological strength.
Yes, and to see how the Reformed view of providence, the idea that God is sovereign over everything, including the insults you receive, completely changes the game.
Okay, so let's start where Edwards starts, with the problem itself. He doesn't just say people are mean. He gives this incredibly detailed breakdown of how people are mean. It's like a taxonomy of injury.
He was a very careful observer of human nature. He wanted his congregation to see themselves in these categories, both as the one being hurt and, more uncomfortably, as the one doing the hurting.
Let's get into this inventory. His first category is injuries to our estates and dealings. So this is about our money, our property, our business life.
Right, and he starts with the obvious stuff, like fraud and deceit. But then he adds this layer of nuance. He talks about taking advantage of a neighbor's ignorance.
That one hit me right away. I immediately thought of the classic shady car mechanic scenario. You bring your car in, you don't know anything about engines, the mechanic knows you're ignorant. So he tells you that you need $1,000 of work you don't actually need. He's weaponizing his knowledge against your lack of it.
That is precisely what Edwards is getting at. It's using an information gap to extract value unfairly. He also talks about a related idea, oppression based on necessity.
What does that look like?
That's exploiting someone who has no other choice. Think about a company that jacks up the price of bottled water after a hurricane.
Price gouging.
Exactly. Or, and this is a modern example, think of a payday lender. They know the person coming to them is desperate. They have no other options. So they charge these insane interest rates. The person agrees, but are they really free? No. They're acting out of necessity. Edwards says leveraging that desperation is a form of injury. It's theft, just with a contract wrapped around it.
That feels incredibly relevant. But he gets even more specific, and this is where I think a lot of us might start to squirm. He talks about unfaithfulness in promises, specifically the slack worker.
Oh, this section is fascinating. He describes someone who does the absolute bare minimum to meet the letter of the contract, but doesn't, in his words, improve time to the utmost.
It sounds a lot like the modern term quiet quitting.
It has echoes of it, for sure. But Edwards frames it theologically. His argument is that if you're hired for a job, you have effectively sold your time and skill to that employer for that specific period. If you intentionally waste that time or if you're negligent and don't give your best effort, you are, in a sense, stealing.
So you're withholding the value you promised to give.
Correct. You're not just taking a paycheck. You're supposed to be contributing to the good of your neighbor, who in this case is your employer. If you're just phoning it in, you're acting out of pure self-interest, not charity.
And then he flips it. He doesn't just talk about the worker. He talks about the one who pays. Withholding what is due.
This is a big one. Making your neighbor struggle or even beg to get paid what you owe them.
Anyone who's ever done freelance work knows this feeling. You do the job, you send the invoice, and then crickets. You have to send 3 follow-up emails. You get excuses. Oh, it's an accounting. Oh, the check's in the mail.
Right. Edwards says that putting your neighbor to that unnecessary trouble is an injury. You're using your power as the payer to make their life difficult. It's a power play. You're holding their livelihood hostage.
Okay, so that's the financial side. That's injury to the wallet. But then he moves on to something that, for many people, hurts even more. Injury type B, our good name, our reputation.
And he comes out swinging on this one. He calls speaking evil behind someone's back the most common and, quote, base iniquity. He says the amount of damage done by this is beyond account.
He makes a really important distinction here that I think we need to zero in on. He talks about slandering, which is easy enough to understand. That's spreading outright lies. But then he talks about misrepresentation. How is that different?
This is such a subtle but critical point. Misrepresentation isn't always about lying about the facts of what happened. It's about how you frame them. It's, in his words, painting a neighbor's actions in the worst colors.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say a coworker makes a mistake in a report. A charitable interpretation might be, he was probably rushed, he's got a lot on his plate. A misrepresentation would be going to the boss and saying, you won't believe how sloppy his work is, he just doesn't care. The fact is the mistake. The misrepresentation is assigning the worst possible motive to it.
It feels like that's the default mode for a lot of online discourse.
Oh, absolutely. You take a 10-second video clip of someone, you strip it of all context, you post it with a caption that frames them as a monster. You're not lying about what they said in those 10 seconds, but you're creating a completely false impression of who they are and what they meant.
You're exaggerating the fault. You're amplifying it.
Exactly. And Edwards says this is just as destructive to a person's reputation as a direct lie. Because once that good name is gone, you can't just give it back. You can pay back stolen money. You can't easily restore a ruined reputation.
Which is why he calls it so base. It's a kind of theft you can't undo. Then he goes even deeper. We've covered business. We've covered reputation. Now he goes to injury type C, thoughts and contempt. This one is genuinely scary because it's entirely internal.
It is. The question is, can you actually injure someone with just a thought? And Edwards argues, yes, you can.
How does that work?
For 2 reasons. First, because God sees the heart. The sin, the violation of charity, begins there. But second, because those internal thoughts never stay purely internal. They always leak out.
So holding someone in low esteem or contempt in your heart, that's the root.
That's the root. It's that feeling of looking down your nose at someone, thinking they're beneath you, they're an idiot, they're worthless. That internal attitude is the injury in seed form.
And he says the tongue becomes the tool of these thoughts. He uses some really vivid metaphors. He compares the tongue to a scourge, a whip, and then to the fangs of a poisonous snake.
The snake bite metaphor is so powerful. Think about it. The puncture wound from a fang can be tiny, almost invisible, but the poison gets injected deep into the system and does its deadly work. A sarcastic comment, a backhanded compliment, a contemptuous sigh, those are the fangs.
They might seem small on the surface.
Right, but they inject the poison of contempt into the relationship and it spreads. It creates bitterness. It all comes from a heart that has refused to honor the image of God in that other person.
Yeah.
And that is a profound injury.
Okay, this is leading into his 4th category, injury type D, which is treatment and behavior. This seems to cover all the ways we interact day to day.
It does. He looks at authority dynamics. He talks about superiors acting tyrannically, the boss who just loves to throw his weight around. But he's balanced. He also talks about inferiors denying proper respect to superiors. It's a two-way street.
He also has a section on willfulness. I think we all know this person. The person who just has to have their own way.
The one who shuts their eyes to reason, who just refuses to yield no matter what. Edwards says that level of stubbornness is a form of injury to everyone around them.
Because it's fundamentally selfish. You're acting as if your interests are the only ones that matter. If you're in a family or on a team and you refuse to compromise simply because you want what you want, you're damaging the group.
It's a violation of community. And very close to that is what he calls party spirit. This felt very political when I read it.
It did to me too.
And it is. But it also applies to office politics, church politics, you name it. It's when you act not for the common good, but just to oppose another person or another party.
So you'd vote against a good proposal just because it came from the other side.
Exactly. You're injuring the whole community just to score points for your team. It's prioritizing tribalism over charity.
And the last item in this grim inventory is malice and envy. Hating a neighbor. And this one is chilling. Being pleased when they fall.
The Germans have a word for it, Schadenfreude. Taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune. Edwards says if your coworker gets fired and your first feeling is a little thrill of joy, that's an injury in your heart.
Or feeling ill will because of their prosperity. Their kid gets into a great college and you feel bitter. They get a promotion and you feel resentful.
You're wishing them harm. Even if you never lift a finger, you're committing the injury in your spirit.
Okay, so the list is complete. It's comprehensive. And people do all of this to us, and we do it to them. The big question now is, what does reformed thinking say we should do about it? How are we supposed to respond?
Right. And this brings us to his solution. This is where he defines meekness. And characteristically, he starts by defining what it is not.
The first thing to go is retaliation. He says meekness means bearing the injury without doing anything to revenge it.
And he's incredibly strict about this. No bitter words, no injurious deeds, no subtle getting even. But he goes even further than actions. He talks about your appearance. You have to maintain a calm, undisturbed countenance.
Wait a minute, I can't even look angry? That sounds impossible. He's trying to police my facial expressions.
It sounds that way, but his logic is that the face reveals the heart. If your face is all twisted up with rage, your heart is probably not in a state of quiet repose. The goal is an internal peace so profound that it actually shows on your face.
But does this mean I can't say anything? This is the doormat question, get him. If someone is actively slandering my name or defrauding my business, do I just have to smile and let it happen? Is he just advocating for total passivity?
No, and this is a really critical piece of nuance. Edwards says you can reprove them. You can and sometimes should confront the person. But, and this is a gigantic, but it has to be done without anger or impoliteness.
How is that even possible? How do you confront someone about something that has deeply hurt you without being angry?
You have to change your motivation. The reproof, Edwards says, has to be rational, and it has to be aimed at their good, not your own vindication.
So the goal isn't, I'm going to tell you off so I feel better.
No. The goal is, I'm pointing this out because what you're doing is self-destructive and dishonoring to God, and I want to see you restored. You're lamenting their sin against God, not just venting your own personal resentment. The focus shifts from you to them and their relationship with God.
That is a massive shift, and it leads right into the next part, what you called the internal requirement. This is where it gets really, really hard.
This is where Edwards the heart surgeon comes out.
Yeah.
He says it's not enough to just be silent on the outside. You can be silent while your heart is a cauldron of rage. You can be silent while plotting their downfall. That's not meekness.
Meekness requires that the heart itself must remain free of revenge.
Yes. He says we must continue to love the person who injured us. We might pity them for their sin, but we cannot hate them. And here's the key phrase. We must not lose the quietness and repose of our own minds.
That phrase, quietness and repose, is so convicting. He basically says, if an injury messes up your peace, or if it ruins your prayer life, you've failed to suffer long.
It's such a practical diagnostic test. If you sit down to pray, and the only thing you can think about is replaying that argument in your head, or imagining what you should have said,
then the injury has conquered you.
It has. You've lost possession of your own soul. He quotes that verse from Lude, in your patience possess ye your souls. If an insult from someone else can send you into an emotional tailspin for 3 days, who's really in control of your soul? Not you.
You've handed the keys over to them. They are now driving your emotional car. What a terrifying thought. We think of anger as a form of power, but Edwards is reframing it as a total loss of control.
It is an abdication of self-government. You've become a puppet, and they're pulling the strings.
Now, Edwards is a realist. He knows there's a practical cost to this. He says that sometimes, for the sake of peace, you have to be willing to suffer loss rather than fight for your rights.
He brings in 1 Corinthians 6.7, where Paul just asks, why do you not rather take wrong? It's a question our culture never asks. We're obsessed with our rights. My right to be respected, my right to be paid on time, my right to my reputation.
He's not saying self-defense is always sinful.
No, not at all. But he's arguing that our default setting is to jump to self-defense way too quickly. Charity, he says, should lead us to suffer considerably before we try to vindicate ourselves.
And the goal is to win the enemy. That's a strange phrase.
It is. But think about it. If I immediately sue you over a dispute, our relationship is over. We're now adversaries, probably for life. But if I absorb a small loss, if I choose to take wrong, there is a chance, maybe a small one, that my gracious response could disarm you and open the door to reconciliation. It's the long game.
So why is this called long-suffering?
Because of two things, magnitude and duration. It's not about small annoyances. He says we have to bear great injuries. And it's not about being patient for a week and then exploding. It's about bearing them for a long time, to the end, if necessary.
Which sounds, humanly speaking, impossible. That sounds like a recipe for a total breakdown. How do you absorb that much poison and not die from it?
And that is the perfect question to lead us into the next section, because you're absolutely right. Humanly speaking, it is impossible. You can't white-knuckle your way through this. It has to flow from something deeper.
And that's the theological basis.
That's the theological engine. It's the core of Reformed thinking. All true virtue flows from a right relationship with God. You don't do this for the person who hurt you. You do this for God.
Okay, so let's walk through his arguments. How does loving God help me deal with the coworker who just stole my idea in a meeting?
Argument number one is the imitation of God. It's simple, really. If you love God, you want to be like him. And the Bible, over and over, describes God as long-suffering.
Edwards asks us to just stop and consider what God's long-suffering actually looks like.
And it's staggering when you think about it. God gives sunlight and rain to people who are actively blaspheming his name. He provides food for entire cities full of wickedness. He gives the very breath to the man who uses that breath to curse him. Every second of every day, God is bearing with an astronomical amount of injury from his creatures.
And then he makes it personal. He says, God bore with us.
For every single Christian, there was a time when we were God's enemy. We were rebels. We were doing our own thing. And God was patient. He bore with our sin and rebellion until he brought us to himself. So Edwards' logic is, if you claim to be a child of this patient father, how can you be so impatient with your brother?
It's an argument from family resemblance.
Exactly.
Okay, argument 2 is gratitude. This is the math problem.
It is. It's based on the parable of the unmerciful servant. Edwards says the injuries we receive from other people are like pence. They're pennies. The injuries we have committed against a holy God are like 10,000 talents.
Yeah.
A debt so massive it's literally unpayable.
The logic is just devastating. If you truly grasp the size of the debt God has forgiven you, how can you turn around and throttle your brother for his tiny debt to you?
To refuse to forgive, Edwards argues, is to practically disapprove of God's forgiveness of you. It's like saying, I accept grace for me, but I demand strict justice for everyone else.
And if you demand strict justice for others, you're inviting God to apply that same standard to you. That's a terrifying place to be.
It is. It's a very dangerous prayer to pray.
Argument number 3 is humility.
This one gets to the root cause of our anger. Love for God shows us our own unworthiness. And what's the root of almost all anger? Pride.
It's that feeling of, how dare you treat me like that? Don't you know who I am? We feel like we're big and the insult is beneath our station.
Precisely. But the humble person, the person who has stood before the holiness of God, doesn't see themselves as big. They see themselves as a sinner saved by grace. So when someone insults them, it doesn't land with the same force.
Because they're already thinking, you don't know the half of it. My own conscience has called me far worse things than that.
You've hit it. It deflates the ego. If your self-image isn't built on a lie of your own perfection, an insult can't shatter it. A humble person is hard to offend because they're already low to the ground. You can't fall very far from the floor.
All right, now for argument 4. This one feels like the most distinctly reformed argument of the bunch. Providence, the sovereignty of God.
This is the absolute game changer. The core idea is that a love for God leads us to see his hand in the injury, not just the hand of the person who hurt us.
He uses that incredible story of David and Shimei.
It's one of the most powerful stories in the Old Testament. David is on the run. His own son, Absalom, is trying to kill him. He is at his absolute lowest point. And this guy, Shimei, from the house of Saul, comes out and starts throwing rocks and dust at him, cursing him.
He's kicking a man when he's down. It's just cruel.
And David's general, Abishai, says what any of us would think. Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head.
Which would have been completely justified. It was treason.
But David's response is just shocking. He says no. And his reason is, the Lord has said to him, curse David.
He looks right past Shimei.
He looks past the secondary cause, the angry man with the rocks, and he sees the primary cause. The sovereign hand of God using this humiliation for some greater purpose, maybe for correction, maybe for a trial of faith.
So if I apply that, when my coworker insults me, the real issue isn't just the coworker. It's that God, in his wisdom, has ordained for me to experience this insult right now for my good.
It completely reframes the event. You stop raging at the person, the stick that hit you, and you look to the hand that's holding the stick. Your question changes from, how do I get revenge on this person, to, Lord, what are you trying to teach me through this? It transforms the injury into a potential means of grace.
That's a radical shift. And the final argument, number 5, is superior happiness.
This is the idea that if you truly love God, your happiness is located somewhere that your enemies can't touch.
He uses the analogy of a fortress.
If your treasure, your true source of joy and security, is in heaven in the favor of God, then earthly attacks are like arrows bouncing off a high stone wall. An enemy can hurt your reputation. They can take your money.
Yeah.
They cannot touch your standing with God.
He quotes Mephibosheth, who, after a dispute over his land, tells David, "Let him take it all, for as much as my lord the king is come again in peace to his own house."
It's such a beautiful declaration of what really matters. I have the king back. The land is just dirt. If we truly believe that having God is our greatest treasure, then losing a bit of reputation or money doesn't devastate us. It's a question of where you've stored your happiness.
Okay, so that's the theological foundation. It's deep and it's solid. Now Edwards moves into what he calls motives and improvement. He's trying to give us practical reasons to actually live this out. And he starts with the biggest one, the example of Christ.
Yes, we've talked about imitating God the Father's patience. But now he zooms in on the life of Jesus. He was the Lord of glory, and yet he was, in Edwards's words, set at naught. He was treated like he was nothing.
And the list of specific injuries is just brutal. He wasn't just disagreed with. He was called a glutton, a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.
They accused him of being insane. In John's Gospel, they say he has a demon and is mad. Can you imagine the eternal word, the very logic and reason of God, being called a madman by his own creatures?
They called him a Samaritan, which was the ultimate ethnic slur of the day. They called him a deceiver.
And it wasn't just words. They threatened him physically. They tried to stone him. They tried to throw him off a cliff. And through every single bit of it, Edwards points out, Jesus maintained his internal calm. He never retaliated.
He went, as Isaiah prophesied, like a lamb to the slaughter. And on the cross itself, in the middle of the ultimate injury, he's praying for his murderers. Father, forgive them.
He's not just passively enduring. He's actively seeking the good of those who are killing him. Edwards says that is the pattern for us. If the master endured this, the servant should not expect a life of ease.
That flows right into his second motive, which is simply the nature of the world, a reality check.
Right. Jesus himself told us, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves." We need to manage our expectations. This is not heaven. This is a fallen world.
I love the image he uses. He says being agitated by an injury is like a sailor being surprised by a storm at sea.
It's a perfect metaphor. If you're a sailor, you expect storms. It comes with the territory. If you're a Christian living in a fallen world, you should expect to be treated unjustly sometimes. It comes with the territory. To be shocked and outraged, "I can't believe they did that," is, in a way, foolish. Of course they did. They're a sinner living in a sinful world.
So our anger is often a sign of our own unrealistic expectations. We're expecting Eden, and when we get the wilderness, we throw a fit.
It's a failure of Christian realism. We forget where we are.
Motive number 3 is about true greatness. This is where he flips our definition of strength on its head.
He brings up Proverbs 16.32. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city.
Better than a great conqueror.
Think about that. Our world idolizes the conquerors, the people who impose their will through force. But God says the person who can control their own temper is greater than the one who can conquer an entire city. The real battle is internal.
Edwards uses another water metaphor here. He says, little shallow streams make a lot of noise when they hit small obstacles, a babbling brook.
But a mighty deep river flows silently over those same obstacles. Think of a massive river like the Amazon. You could drop a car into it and it would just swallow it up and keep moving. He's saying that noise and agitation are signs of spiritual shallowness. Meekness, the silent absorption of injury, is a sign of spiritual depth and greatness.
And the Babylon metaphor.
Yes, the walls of ancient Babylon were said to be so high and thick that when an army came to besiege them, the people inside would just stand on the walls and laugh. They were completely safe. Edwards says a meek soul is fortified like that. The insults and injuries are thrown, but they can't get over the wall to disturb the inner peace.
That's a powerful picture, not the laugh of mockery, but the laugh of absolute security. His fourth motive is the example of the saints. It's not just Jesus. Other mere mortals have lived this way.
He brings up David again, his relationship with Saul. Saul was hunting him like an animal, and David had two clear opportunities to kill Saul and end his suffering. But he refused to touch the Lord's anointed. He chose to wait on God's timing.
And Stephen, the first Christian martyr?
As the stones are hitting him, his dying words are a prayer for his executioners. Lord, do not hold this sin against them. He's echoing his master. It proves that this is possible for a human being filled with the Holy Spirit.
And then Paul. He lists his own sufferings. Reviled, persecuted, homeless, treated like the scum of the earth. And what's his response? When we are reviled, we bless.
It's the consistent witness of the saints. They turn the world upside down, not by fighting back with worldly weapons, but by outloving and outsuffering their enemies.
Okay, so the motors are laid out, but Edwards is a good pastor. He knows that even after all this, we're still sitting here making excuses. Yes, but. So he moves into his final section, answering objections.
And he anticipates them perfectly. They're the same objections we make today.
Objection number 1. The injury is too great. It's intolerable. Flesh and blood just can't bear this.
And Edwards just immediately turns the mirror back on the objector. His response is it really? Is this injury you've suffered worse than the injuries you have committed against God?
Back to the 10,000 talents.
Always back to that. He asks, do you approve of God forgiving you for your massive debt? And if the answer is yes, then why won't you imitate him? And then he drops the hammer. If you pray the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, and you are not forgiving, you are literally asking God not to forgive you.
You're praying a curse on yourself. That's a sobering thought.
It is.
Okay, objection 2. But they won't stop. They persist in it. They keep doing it over and over.
His response is twofold. First, God bears with your persistence. You sin every day. You don't just sin once and you're done. You persist in your sinfulness, and yet his mercy is new every morning.
And second, he suggests the persistence might be the whole point of the trial.
Right. Maybe God is allowing it to continue, to test and strengthen your grace. A muscle doesn't get strong from one lift. It needs sustained resistance over time.
All right, objection 3. This is the big one for modern ears. If I don't fight back, they'll just walk all over me. My meekness will just encourage their bad behavior. I have to stand up for myself.
This is the objection we all feel. And Edwards' rebuttal is, first, you don't know the future. You assume that fighting back is the best strategy to stop the behavior, but observation often shows the opposite.
Revenge just provokes more revenge. It's an escalating cycle.
It is. Whereas a meek and gentle answer can sometimes, not always, but sometimes, disarm an enemy. It puts the fire out by refusing to add more fuel. But the more theological part of his answer is the promise from Romans 12. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord.
So if I take vengeance myself, I'm playing God, I'm stealing his job.
And you're almost certainly worse at it than he is. The argument is, if you obey God by being meek, God himself will undertake your cause. He will be your defender. You can trust him to bring about justice in his way, in his time.
That requires an immense amount of faith.
It's the whole ball game. It all comes back to whether or not you believe God is sovereign and just.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, Edwards leaves us with a final warning and a final vision.
The warning is stark. God deals with us by the same standard we use for others. If we are harsh, critical, and unforgiving, we cannot expect gentleness and forgiveness from him.
But then there's the vision. He asks us to just imagine a society where this spirit of meekness actually prevailed.
No backbiting, no gossip, no fighting for position, no harsh words, just a community of people patiently bearing with one another's faults in love.
He says it would be a foretaste of heaven on earth.
It really would. It would be what the church is called to be.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on, something that's woven through this whole sermon. We tend to think that the person who lands the last punch or gets in the last cutting remark is the winner.
That's the world's definition of victory.
But Edwards flips that completely. He suggests that if your enemy can disturb your inner peace, if they can make you lose your quietness and repose, then they have conquered you.
They've gotten inside your walls. They are living rent-free in your head.
But if you can remain calm, if you can possess your soul in patience,
Then you've frustrated their entire goal. The arrow they shot at you has fallen harmlessly to the ground. You are the one who remains unconquered.
the ultimate power move isn't striking back. It's having a soul so at peace in God that the injury can't even find a place to land.
That is true strength. That is true greatness.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive at Reformed Thinking. We'll see you next time.